It's the death of the Republican Party as we've known it. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Stanley Greenberg, the Clinton family pollster from going back several election cycles, has a new book out called R.I.P, G.O.P. And basically, he's saying that the death of the Republican Party is coming not so much because of any particular thing that Democrats are doing, but rather the inexorable forces of demography, which are going to hit like a tidal wave. He says even worse than 2018. Let me read this little quote. And this, by the way, was brought to our attention by the talented Michelle Goldberg, columnist for the New York Times, who quotes Greenberg as saying, the year 2020 will produce a second blue wave on at least the scale of the first in 2018. And finally, we'll crash and shatter the Republican Party that was consumed by an ill-begotten battle to stop the new America, that's capitalized, the new America, from governing. Bill, I guess this is the end, my friend.
Well, it's certainly end if we don't do anything about it. But that's been our case throughout our entire history, and we always have. So I don't see any reason why this would be any different. This fight is no more terrible than the other fights that this country's had to go through in order to stay alive. And I fully expect that the leaders of this particular battle are going to step up and that the republic will be preserved. I genuinely believe it. If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't be here. Boy, there's a lot in there. And I don't know about you, I mean, actual you, Superman, you, not mild-mannered liberal reporter Scott Ott. But when I hear somebody trumpeting New America, I just get the willies. I mean, I really, that term scares me badly. And the reason it scares me badly is because, like so many other people who watch this program, so many people out there in the country, I love the old America. I think the old America is essentially the best form of government that there's ever been and likely to be. And we try to return it. As I've said a few times, it's not that we don't want any government. It's just that we want a government that fits in the box that it came in. And so the battle continues.
Well, see, Bill, things like that right there. I love the old America. And one of the things that Greenberg's book points out, apparently, according to Michelle Goldberg in the New York Times, of course, I'm getting this second or third hand, but that the problem with the Republican Party is not just that they're not paying attention to the needs of the young and immigrants and growing groups, social groups that see themselves as distinct entities, but, and I'm quoting here, but they're making a cruel and doomed stand against the coming generation. In other words, the Republican Party is actively hostile against the burgeoning demographic groups that are springing up and flowering.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and by and large, he's right on that one. I have made it a personal crusade, at least in the speaking events that I do, to point out to Republican women's federated groups or Tea Party events that the average age in the room is deceased, and that we wonder why there are no young people there. When you walk into a Tea Party event, you'll see. I've spoken at many, and the one that I go to quite a bit has got this tremendous stage, and there's, the Constitution, enormous panels blown up Constitution. Here's an engraving of Jefferson, an engraving of Franklin. And I say to the people at these meetings, look, we know what this means, and that's why it's dear to us, and that's why we put it up here. But if you're a young person and you've never really been taught any of this stuff, specifically Ramona is the place I'm thinking of, then a young person who may have some interest in this hears the word Tea Party, which sounds like old women sitting around, with their pinkies extended playing canasta. And when they come into a room like this, they see all of this stuff that says that everything we believe is 250 years old, and that we're the people that believe in ruffled collars and flintlock muskets and riding on animal skins with sharpened goose feathers. And it's a compelling argument. We assume that this generation has absorbed the same things that we absorbed, and that's why we're not reaching them. So there's good news here and bad news. The bad news is demographically he's right. I have a picture that I saw from a piece of research a little over a year ago. It's the electoral map of the United States if only millennials voted, and Republicans carry Utah.
This is if millennials only voted rather than if only millennials voted.
If only millennials voted, yeah. This is a consummation devoutly not to be wished for at the present moment. Yes, if only millennials voted, if millennials only voted, we get Utah, and they win. I forget what the number is, 536-6 or something like that.
So Greenberg points out, this is Stanley Greenberg, the pollster for both Bill and Hillary Clinton. Stanley Greenberg points out in this R.I.P. G.O.P. book that is forthcoming that he is foreseeing the death of the Republican Party as we've known it, and a Democratic Party, get this, liberated from the nation's suffocating polarization to use government to advance the public good. So, Bill, it's not just that the Republican Party is paying no attention to the burgeoning new America that is sprouting up, but that the Democrats, in fact, have a message of hope that says government is a force for good if only you will embrace it.
All of this has got a lot of truth in it. Now, there's a couple things that he's leaving out, and that's what I'll get to in just a minute here. But you say he was the pollster for Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton?
And Bill Clinton, that's correct.
Do you happen to know what his poll numbers were the night before the election?
I do not have that at my fingertips, no.
Would you be willing to agree with me that likely he had Hillary ahead by significant margin?
Well, either that or he was just packing boxes and paying no attention to the TV coverage.
My point is, the last poll he issued prior to the actual election, I'd be willing to bet you, had Hillary up by several points over Donald Trump in late October, early November of 2016. Would you say that's a fair assumption?
Yes, it says, and I'm looking at the details in Michelle Goldberg's column, it says he became famous as Bill Clinton's pollster in 1992, and he consulted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and frankly disagreed with her on a number of approaches she took.
Okay, well, in any event, it doesn't seem like his capacity for prophecy is completely flawless here. So if a guy can make a mistake that big, then he can make other mistakes. And I'll get to that in just a second. It would be an enormous mistake for me to gloss over the seriousness of what he's saying, because this is what I do in my spare time. I'm utterly convinced that the messaging of the future is a series of science fiction shorts that are 7 or 8 minutes long that don't mention Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. They simply show a moral situation and show people rather than tell people. I'm utterly convinced of this, and I'm trying to get this funded. But in the meantime, he's right, but this is a huge exception here. He's absolutely right about the demographics. And 2 years ago, I would have reluctantly agreed with him. A year ago, I would have been in doubt. And now I am convinced he's wrong. And the reason for all of these things is because when I'm not working on stuff for this channel, I am listening very carefully to young people's YouTube channels and Twitch channels. I listen to a lot of gamer channels. I listen to a lot of fan commentary channels, Marvel Comics channels, and so on. And what I've seen across the board, without exception, is a movement that is not only getting stronger, but getting stronger faster. And that is an absolute disgust and hatred of progressive politics, not because of the politics. They probably think that Bernie's fine. It's not what this generation is disgusted about and angry about. What they're disgusted and angry about is their entire lives, these millennials, they've had, the young men especially, have only had one place to retreat from the harping of these social justice warriors and the everybody gets a trophy brigade that they were raised under. They don't have the social strength to say, no, I disagree with all of you, like anybody else, especially teenagers back in the day. They tend to just kind of nod their head and go along. But what has happened to this generation, this young generation, the one that's going to cause the death of the G.O.P., according to this idiot, is very important. What those people do, specifically those young men do, is they go to class and they hear about what awful people they are for being male, what awful people they are for being white, and so on. And they nod their heads and they bow and they scrape. And then the second that class is over, they run into their dorm rooms or their bedrooms or wherever they are, and they get on computer games. And I've been playing computer games since they came out. I'm probably the world's oldest gamer. And I'm here to tell you, there are only two things that happen in every single computer game out there, essentially. You make money and you buy weapons. I like to make money and buy weapons, and I'm a conservative. And what I've discovered is that this generation has checked out of the real world and checked into the virtual world, because in computer games, you get to act like a conservative. You get to blow things up, you get to shoot things, you get to drive fast, you get hot babes, you get all of it. The left understands this, and they have pursued this generation into Star Wars, into the Marvel Comics universe, into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They've pursued them into Star Trek. They've pursued them into everything that they cared about, because it reminded them of the days of their early youth before the stuff got really to critical mass. And the rage and the hatred and the disgust and the anger at the left for having destroyed these institutions. The next Thor is going to be, what's her name? Black Swan, Natalie Portman is going to be the next Thor. She's 100 pounds, and she's going to be in armor, and she's going to carry a hammer that's bigger than she is, because you will learn your lessons, and your lesson is that women can do anything that men can do better, including wielding a hammer that weighs 200 pounds.
So, Bill, let me throw out a couple of names for you.
So let me just tie it up with a bow. I won't go on much longer. Just to tie it up. So everything that they love is being destroyed by the left. And I have watched this generation in the space of 2 or 3 years go from a left-leaning group of people who are not terribly politically interested in anything, as I wasn't at that age, to ever-expanding numbers of people who are speaking like William F. Buckley or rock-rib conservatives only because they're rebelling against what the likes of this guy have done to their escape hatch. And this is an enormously, enormously potent weapon. And if we don't use it, then we have no excuse for what happens.
So here's a couple of names. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, Lindsey Graham, a prominent senator who's often on cable television, Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, whoever's the leader of the RNC right now. Which among that group do you think is most active in monitoring what's going on among gamers in the culture?
If I had to guess, I'd say Ted Cruz, but certainly I don't think any of them are terribly up on it. And now at this exact moment, for those of you who are watching at home, at this exact instant, we now come down to the problem, because a vast majority of people who are watching the show right now says, what does gaming have to do with anything? Why, what difference does it make? It's gaming. No, it is the reality that young people have sought out and created and spent their own money on. There's a game that came out earlier this year called Red Dead Redemption Part 2. It's a cowboy game. Basically, it's all done in the computer, incredible graphics, very, very good graphics. You ride around and you basically live in the Old West. That game made $550 million in 2 days from millennials spending the limited amount of money they have on it. They spent $550 million of their own money in 2 days, Scott, so that they could play cowboys and Indians. Am I starting to get through to you now? Am I starting to get through to you that the biology of people is that they want to be individuals, that there's no such thing as collective storytelling? It just doesn't exist. If this generation were retreating to a world where the computer games allowed them to write petitions about green actions and then march down the street holding signs, I'd say it's over, go to Montana, stack up on beans and ammo. But that's not what these people are doing. Young people are doing everything they can full-time. They are trying to get full-time into a gaming world where they get to be their grandfathers. They're playing games like Medal of Honor and Battlefield and Ghost Recon, and they're jumping out of C-47s over Normandy, and they're shooting Nazis, which is what you're supposed to do when you're that age. And this has convinced me that you cannot beat the biology out of people. And it's further convinced me that this guy is wrong, because his philosophy, this new America philosophy, this philosophy of constant, everlasting, endless just moaning and complaining about everything, about making injustice where it isn't any, about having trans athletes beating female athletes by 3 or 4 seconds and being on the top of the podium and just tickled to death. All of this madness and insanity. They have not stood and fought because they've never had anybody teach them how to stand and fight, but they have left. And the world they have left to is a world where conservative values reign, because conservative values are biological values. They're innate values. You can't beat it out of people. And so I'm extremely hopeful for the future. What I'm trying to do is trying to convince an entire half of the country, which is practical-minded conservatives, that this is the battlefield, that this is it. The pop culture is not just a battlefield in the ongoing war. It is the war. It's all of the war. It's where we get everything from. Star Wars is a religion for post-Christian America. It was anyway until the left destroyed it. So we've got a lot of angry, furious, dispirited young people out there whose entire worlds have been ruined by left-wing philosophy and left-wing lecturing and hectoring and all the rest. The exact kind of people that wrote that article. And they're not coming to the GOP. It may not even be coming to Republicans at all, but they are certainly leaving this social justice warrior new Democratic Party that this guy's proclaiming. And I would bet my life on it. I would bet my life on it that he's wrong about this. He's wrong about this because what he sees is he sees the politics of the world. He sees the feminization of men. He sees the perpetual adolescence of an entire generation. And he looks around and says, great, that's fantastic. We've won. But what he doesn't see is that those people haven't changed. They've simply retreated. They've gone someplace where they get to act like conservatives. And that's where our messaging should be. To close this little tirade, let me simply say this. I took a look at an average video gamer's total number of views. I totaled up like the top 6 conservative commentators on YouTube, totaled their subscribers. I took a look at the top 6 gaming videos, totaled their subscribers.
Did you include PewDiePie?
Yes.
Okay.
I certainly did. 83 million subscribers, as I recall. Okay. I've got 150,000. 83 million. And my point is this. If you put this on a graph, and I have, what you find is there's a wedge that's about 1 or 2% wide that consists of internet commentary. And then there's another 98, 99% wide that is dealing with gaming related issues. And that's where young people are. And that's where we need to be. And it's not even that we need to be there, Scott, because we're there already. Storytelling is inherently conservative. I know I'm rehashing a bunch of tired old lines that I use, but they're good lines. And when I say that storytelling is conservative, what I mean by that is nobody's going to pay money to go see a James Bond movie where James Bond delivers the supervillain a harshly worded letter from the United Nations, then drives off in a Prius at a reasonable speed. No one is going to go see that movie. No one. So if they want to make James Bond into a black woman, then James Bond franchise will disappear. All of this stuff is happening. They're furious and they're making their own content and they're playing computer games where they are Sergeant frickin' Rock and they're laying down suppressing fire and they're calling in airstrikes and it is so heartening. It's the only thing out there that is heartening to me, that and the fact that we own the guns. And it's underneath the surface, and to convince practical-minded Republicans to get behind this kind of thing is virtually impossible. And we are leaving the largest lever on the largest, not just the largest slice of the pie, on the pie. I mean, we're dealing with the crusts. We're dealing with the outer, we're dealing with the crumbs that fall off of the pie. We need to get into this fight. And not only do we need to get into it, we have the message that they want to hear. We just have to show them that the things that they do in the virtual world are the same results that they would get in the real world if they would just apply them.
Bill, let me finish up here asking for a relatively brief response to something I observed in the lunchroom at my other job yesterday. There was an older black man. By older, I mean anybody who's a year older than me is older. And and he was talking to a younger Latina woman. And by younger, I mean anybody who's a year younger than me is young. And they were discussing all the the problems with President Trump, the things they didn't like about him. And the whole time there was a guy who's probably, I'm going to say he's 25, 28 years old. He's sitting next to them. He's eating his lunch. The hair on one side of his head has been shaved down to about 1/4 of an inch high. The hair from about the top of that side all the way, it flows long down to almost to his shoulder on the other side. It's been bleached, kind of a flaxen color. He's got some tattoos, I think a couple of piercings.
Sure.
Kind of a skinny guy, sloppily dressed, and he's eating his lunch while they're talking about President Trump. And the older gentleman turned to him and said, sort of good-naturedly said, "Well, I bet you voted for Donald Trump here." And the kid looked up and said, "What?" So he wasn't even paying attention, first of all. Secondly, and he said, "Yeah, I bet you voted for Donald Trump, and so you don't like what we're saying here." And
Kiddingly.
And the kid said, "Oh man, I didn't vote for anybody."
Okay. So I'll close with that observation. That's not like he voted for Donald Trump. That's not good news. But to say that he didn't vote for anybody means that he's essentially not in the game. For this blue tide to happen, he's going to have to be converted into somebody who goes out and votes for Democrats. But this is the point. This is very, 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 very important. When somebody shaves their head that way and bleaches their hair on the other side of their head and they're covered with tattoos and piercings, they're not only calling for attention to themselves, but they are stating in as open a term as they possibly can that I am a rebel. I do not play by the rules of society. I have nothing but contempt for the rules of society. And guess who else has that attitude in politics? There's only one person in politics right now. In fact, the only person I've ever seen, ever, in politics, who has this rebellious attitude of the whole game is crooked and it's got to go. And that person is Donald Trump. And I'm telling you that when a person like that has been subjected to this endless litany of how awful this person is, this guy with the shaved head, how awful he is, what a wretched, horrible person he is, what a wretched, horrible country he lives in. When Donald Trump comes along and just says, "Oh, you're all a bunch of loser has-beens from Hollywood. I don't trust any of you people," that resonates. And we have to get to the message to these people, but this is where we run into the problem. We think the way to reach that guy is to hand him a folded piece of paper with a wavy American flag on it, and then "We the people" written in cursive that he can't even read, right? And we think that this is the solution. Let's give this guy a pamphlet. I actually, and I mean this with great sincerity, it broke my heart. It really did. But when I talked to one of these groups that I speak to about what they're doing for young people, they had told me that they had set up a lending library. So you mentioned a bunch of names like Mitch McConnell and so on. There are other names. There's Candace Owen and Sabo and Ben Shapiro and others. But I don't know anybody who understands as clearly as I do where the battlefield is, and that if you're going to reach these people, you cannot under any circumstances show your colors. It's not about republicanism. It's not about conservatism. It's about individuality. It's about heroics. It's about courage. If you can tap into that, you've got a Republican voter, which is why Star Wars had to be destroyed. You can't have a young man who comes from nowhere decide to use personal courage and risk his life to upend the existing social order. Are you out of your mind? That has to be destroyed. And they tried to destroy it, and they did. So we have a lot of work in front of us. And if there was ever a show that you've watched and would like to help with, if this one is the one to convince you to become a member, I don't know what else will. And by the way, I have a 501c3 so that for this particular project. So if you want to make a tax-deductible donation, you can certainly reach us at info@billwhittle.com. But my God, do we need your help? It's not a whole lot of money that we need, but we need to give them an island to land on. It's like island hopping in the Pacific. We don't have to conquer the entire Pacific Ocean. We just have to put down places where everybody can land. And when we say it's okay to be in favor of defending yourself, because every single millennial on the planet out there now is wielding weapons of one kind or another, whether they're doing it in Fortnite or whether they're doing it in Medal of Honor. Every single one of them is carrying more weapons than they can carry. If we don't understand that this is our opportunity, then I I say we have no excuse. I really do. We'd better wake up and understand not only where the fight is, but that the fight is going our way. Biology's on our side. Let's just push him over the edge. And he could take his blue wave and put it where the rest of his predictions for Hillary Clinton's inevitable victory came from.
Encouraging and equipping the faithful to reach out to your circle of influence to be able to bring people into the fold and to teach them the song of liberty, so to speak. That's what we do here 5 days a week at BillWhittle.com. We're grateful to the members who make that possible. We had a fellow commented the other day, one of our members, who basically said, sometimes I feel we're preaching to the choir. And my response to him was, yes, that's part of it. We're preaching to the choir because the choir needs encouragement just like everybody else. And the members at BillWhittle.com are encouraging one another and equipping one another. But that then spreads out into your neighborhood, into your family, into your workplace, into your university setting, into your gaming community, wherever you operate. We are grateful. Go ahead.
I would just like to repeat the words of Winston Churchill to Franklin Delano Roosevelt when Lend-Lease was under discussion. He basically said, give us the tools and we will finish the job. Okay? It's that simple. Give us the tools and we will finish the job.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are at this job every day of the week, and so are you. We appreciate the contributions of the members of BillWhittle.com. If you'd like to join their ranks, go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thank you.